guys. So I just want to quickly introduce the topic for the next 45 minutes. We're going to be talking about the future of marketing, particularly related to content consumption. And I want to start by first talking about China and how a pale guy from Oxford is here talking to you guys today about the China market, and what gives me a slight authority to stand in front of you today and tell you why you should all listen about what makes China one of the most innovative and creative countries and also places for marketing in the world. So when I was 14 years old, my mum actually signed me up for Mandarin classes in the evenings. That's exactly what a kid wants to be doing after a full sort of day of studying, going and doing some more studying. But I was quite fortunate in that I was studying in Oxford, and I was surrounded by a lot of economists, PhD students, and professors who were all learning Mandarin. And as I was told at the age of 14, that China was the future. Now, that was 14 years ago. And I was very, very excited when I started to really dive into the Chinese market and begin to go and start to study the language, the culture, the economics. But actually, as much as I was excited, and a lot of the people I studied Chinese with were excited, a lot of people asked me some very strange questions. The one that I remember the most about my childhood was my uncle, who is actually also an immigrant to the UK, asked me, why would I be studying Chinese? Am I going to open a Chinese takeaway in the future? And what was most interesting about that particular comment was the fact that 10 years ago, nobody knew anything really about China. And this is Tim. Tim actually owns the Chinese restaurant opposite my house where I grew up. So Tim was actually my first ever real interaction with the Chinese culture. So whether it was Tim giving me a Chinese calendar for every Chinese New Year or lessons on how to use chopsticks, it was actually quite an interesting comment that my uncle had made, because it was very ignorant of the fact that China had the fastest growing economy at that time in the world, but not a lot of people knew what that would turn into. So in 1960, the Chinese economy was 20% smaller than the UK economy. And by 2004, it actually began to surpass the UK economy until in 2006 actually became one of the largest economies in the world, just after the US. And in that time, there was this huge transformation. And it's very, very good to have this visualization that is able to show how quick and rapid that growth was. And what that meant is that a huge number of people were lifted out of poverty, but also a lot of technological advancement happened in that time period. So what we found is that in 2004, when I first started learning Chinese, only 1 in 10 of the Chinese population was online. So about 100 million people were using the internet. Today, it's around 800 million people, just over half of the population of China. There are over 1 billion people that are now using mobile devices. And what that's led to is this absolutely incredible development for accessing technology. So we can see now that China is beginning to take its position and become a leader on the world stage. And China is not stopped developing, and it's also one of the things that is a key focus is technology. And so the Chinese government has made a big pledge by the year 2025 to increase their growth in GDP largely around technological development. So at the moment, China still relies a lot on Western countries for a lot of their technology. About 40% of technology is only actually produced within China. What they want to do is increase that to 70%. And so what you're seeing now, which is underneath a lot of the rhetoric around the trade war, is around technology. China has been going out there and buying a lot of the world's technological infrastructure and hardware. And that's led to this huge, huge growth of Chinese tech companies. Now, there are 164 Chinese unicorns. Now there's more unicorns in China than there are unicorns in the States, with a total valuation of around $630 billion. Of the top 10 decacorns, which are any startup that's valued over $10 billion, China now accounts for 6 out of 10 of those companies. Companies you probably never heard of, but those companies are now buying up because of the huge amount of investment that they have, going around buying up the technology around the world. So an example would be a company like Didi, who actually are valued at around $60 billion. They bought out Uber in China, and they've been going around the world buying up other technology companies around the world. They now have around 100 million users in international markets on their platforms. Another company that you may have heard of would be Tencent, who own a platform called WeChat, and WeChat has around 100 million users in international markets. Then Alibaba, again, has been buying up overseas technology companies, and they have around 150 million users internationally. And another company, ByteDance, who have recently launched an app in the Western markets called TikTok, has around 200 monthly active users on their platforms. So one of the key things I wanted to come and talk to you guys today about was not just that China is this place of huge economic growth and these absolute behemoths of technology companies, but actually these companies are here and they are spreading across the globe. And in the next 10 years, they will own pretty much all of the technological infrastructure on the planet. And therefore, the content that they're currently producing and the platforms that they've created are very, very important for us as Western marketers, because the technology that they're implementing in their local markets are things that we will begin to implement here. China was known many years ago as a copycat nation. Everyone knows about fake DVDs, rip-off brands, and we laughed at them. We said, oh, they can't invent their own things. It's completely flipped now. China is the country of innovation. You now see features that are appearing on Snapchat, on Facebook. They're all things that have been happening in China for 5-6 years. What is phenomenal about these markets is that the adoption of technology is really a window into the future for the rest of the world. And so what I wanted to show you guys today is also how we can look at some of those platforms, some of those things that are happening, and begin to get inspiration and ideas for how we can develop the ways that we're communicating with our audiences. A great background to one of the things that I find most interesting is that combination of the people that we're talking to versus the platforms. I don't think in China, when it comes to marketing, that you could ever replicate the brand marketing that you would do in the West, the storytelling elements. They all have to be very localized. But in terms of the marketing function of finding and engaging with your consumers, those features are very much, I think, appeal to millennials all across the world, and they are the people that are really driving the growth in China. So I wanted to show you a quick video about millennials in Shanghai.
China is the land of superlatives. Every day we hear of another, largest, fastest, highest, whateverist. Yet very little is understood about the people and the attitude behind these headlines. Kumin's ambition is to change that by showing brands how to engage the Chinese audiences based on their audience behavior. Today, over 400 million Chinese millennials browse, compare, like and purchase on an unprecedented scale. Thanks to the recent economic rise and changing social landscape, China is now a market of the most digitally active consumers on the planet.
Is this interview happening right now? 我觉得 Tesla。
第一个的话还是 GUCCI 的笔盒。
我个人还是比较喜欢，就是比较经典的吧，像路易威登，我喜欢它的质量，它的包带的质量，我觉得确实是蛮不错。
Luxury brand，
巴黎香港就巴黎世家，因为可能他们整体的设计和风格都跟以往有很大的改变，而且也结合了很多运动街头的风格。
迪奥的唇膏、粉底等一系列护妆护肤品牌。
因为我觉得 Gucci 现在有很大的新的血液在它的设计里面，然后越来越多的年轻人也更喜欢他们的这种一些新的一些的 design。Prada
也出一些就是很卡通的那种系列。
其实我个人并没有买奢侈品的习惯，就一般作为男生来讲，我只给前女友买过东西。
你老婆跟你妈掉进水里，你先救哪一个是一样的一个概念。
你遇到了他，你觉得他很对，或者说你跟他相处一段时间，你觉得他非常的 OK， 跟你平时你想要的都一模一样，你们也能一起去做一起想做的事情。
知乎是我用，主要是我用 Tinder 跟 Grindr。对，
它那其实也蛮好用的，但是陌陌现在来说并不是一个很好的东西。我一直以来没有在上面找到很多真实有效的东西。
我妈有的时候就除了说她出去开会，有的时候可能说我们出去旅游或者我们出去玩，她就会觉得很麻烦。
比如说日本是一定要去啊。
80后、90后会这样自由安排自己的行程，但是就我们父母那一辈，他们就因为对这些网络的东西都很闭塞的，所以说对他们来讲，出去基本上还是跟团。
90后的话，我觉得选择更加多元吧，大家会去一些比较小众的一些地方，比如说像什么毛里求斯。最近不是开了一个就是中国免签吗？还有一个地方是那个，就是摩洛哥。
我现在其实特别想去，应该是日本吧。
因为我酒精过敏，然后我接受这个事实之后，我再也没有喝过酒了。
应该是鸡尾酒比较多一点吧，女生嘛就可能喝鸡尾酒比较多，喜欢加奶的那种，whisky。
我偶尔喝一喝啤酒。
我的沐浴露就是，就是 Burt's Bees 吧，就是那个美国的那个，就是也是很 organic， 然后他们的味道非常好闻。
我用的比较多的是日本的品牌，一般用的洗护套装都是水之蜜语，然后我用的是 Pola 的那个Pola 的沐浴乳。
Nike。
That's all right.
Yeah, that's all.
Oh.
China is the land.
So one of the things that video does for me so effectively is actually breaks down some of those preconceptions. When I showed that to my uncle, who 10 years ago thought that I was going to open a Chinese takeaway, I think he could see that China is no different, really, to the young people that live here. And that's one of the key things, I think, when looking at, although they live in a country that has very, very different social platforms and very different cultural and social sort of truths that they build a lot of their marketing on, China consumes content just like we do in the West. They, although happen to be the most digitally engaged consumers on the planet, you'll struggle to find a generation that's more confident now than the Chinese generation that have grown up in the 90s and noughties. They really do feel as if they live in one of the most advanced countries in the world. And when you go there, and you discover that you can't use cash to pretty much do anything now in the major cities, you start to think they're actually probably onto something. So not only are Chinese consumers the most digitally engaged in the world, and they're now, with over 1 billion mobile devices, they also have the highest mobile penetration in any market. But just like millennial consumers in the West, they also trust influencers and have very, very short attention spans. So content to them needs to be fresh, it needs to be engaging, but it also needs to help them to position themselves in their own spheres of influence and be seen to be associating with people that are have a lot of social currency. So some of the things that are happening in China around AI, AR, VR, QR, lots of acronyms there, mobile payments, social OS, these are all things that are really kind of driving developments in China and driving the development of certain platforms. So I'm going to quickly run through some of the things happening in each of these sectors and how we can take some inspiration of what they're doing and start to see how that could be applied in the future in the West. I think a lot of the times technology is used in marketing as a bit of a fad. So somebody will say, oh, chatbots are the next big thing. Let's do a chatbot campaign. But then they don't really invest the time into making sure that those campaigns or those changes in mindset or thinking are actually deployed properly to help support the business. Whereas in China, they often think of things more from a, how is this going to improve our lives and how is it going to improve our service, as opposed to using them as just a bit of a marketing campaign and piece for awareness. So everything is largely underpinned by the development around artificial intelligence. So China is the largest market for AI development, has the highest amount of investment going into AI. And we're not just talking about smart devices like the equivalent of Alexa, but we're also talking about actual artificial intelligence in terms of engaging with almost virtual people. So China's had sort of very sophisticated chatbots through their social platforms for probably 4 or 5 years. One of the largest followed accounts on one of the social media platforms, Weibo, has been an AI chatbot for many years. It was live until it got in a bit of trouble for making some controversial statements last year about wanting to live the American dream and not the Chinese one. So it got deleted. But up to that point, there were a lot of people talking about how chatbots will effectively replace consumer and customer sort of engagement. So with AI, what China has really invested the time into doing is building it into their systems in terms of marketing automation. So for example, WeChat, which has access to over 1 billion users and the data on what people are buying and what people are engaging with in terms of their content, they're using that to more effectively create targeted ads, but also personalized ads, so personalization on scale. Because of these rise of these super apps, which I'll talk about as we come up to some of the sections on social OS, what that's allowed us to do is really have a lot more data about those customers and use artificial intelligence to craft more personalized experiences. One of the things that is the most frightening about artificial intelligence in China is how there is often a big distrust around mainstream media, just because of areas around censorship, but also people like to trust news that comes from their social networks. But China still puts in a lot of investment into their media, and so most recently they released the world's first ever artificial intelligence news reporter. So he's available now 24 hours a day,
Hello,
365
everyone.
days a year.
I'm an English artificial intelligence anchor. This is my very first day in Xinhua's agency. My voice and appearance are modeled on Zhang Zhao, a real anchor with Xinhua. The development of the media industry calls for
real-life news anchor.
Innovation and deep
I don't know how
integration
he
with the
feels about having
international
a virtual
technologies.
version of him
I
reporting
will
the
work
news,
tirelessly to keep you
because he kind of
informed as
becomes a bit
texts will be
redundant.
typed into my system,
But these are the kind of
uninterrupted.
innovations that China
I
is
look
rolling
forward
out.
to bringing you the brand new
I don't
news
think we'd ever see an artificial intelligence Jon Snow on Channel 4, but there is still a lot of way for us to come in the West versus what China is rolling out on state television. So this is from the Xinhua, China's biggest news organization. Then when we begin to look at some of the developments around AR and VR, because of the proliferation of smartphones, smart devices, but also in China, hardware is very, very cheap. So in terms of getting VR headsets or having VR goggles at theme parks, things like that, China is able to do those things because it has a low cost base. Even when it comes to artificial intelligence around smart devices or IoT in the home, China sells the equivalent of the Amazon Echo for about £10. So there are millions and millions of these devices being sold because they're pretty easy to acquire. So one of the things that China has begun to do around AR and VR is to actually combine that with that huge market and demand for social commerce. So actually, more people are using that technology because there's actually a commercial return from using it. Whereas in the West, when we're using AR and VR, it's a bit of a fad, really. It's to enrich an experience, but it's very rarely connected to that idea of closing the loop in terms of generating revenue for your marketing activity. Because China does have that huge amount of e-commerce sales through mobile, they're able to supplement all of the activity they're doing with AR or VR. And I have a very good example of Alibaba doing that.
戴上就好了。哎，画面动了。
I have used this, and this is actually what you do. You do see this through the VR.
照片会动。什么情况？我这是在哪？
Where did you come from?
这哥们儿吓我一跳。
Now that you're here, welcome to the Big Apple. You should really enjoy yourself.
哎，这不是时代广场吗？我来过的。我居然从杭州穿越到了纽约。
Time to go.
Macy's， 梅西，美国最大的百货商场啊。
Hi, and welcome to Macy's, the largest department store. Mm-hmm. 这个包蛮有趣的，材质也不错。 买一个送我女朋友吧，国内都没见过。
So very quickly, you can be taken from a VR experience then straight through to an e-commerce endpoint in a very, very rich environment. Now, obviously, in the West, we don't have platforms with the size and scale necessarily as Alibaba and Tmall, and so it can be quite difficult to produce a lot of this content without having those systems. So, you know, we have to have that development a lot of the time come from the platforms where commerce is taking place. We have a very sort of, I guess, in China, there's a lot of ecosystems that are kind of Tencent and Alibaba. They build all of the services in one place, whereas here, everything is very spread out and very split. So often we go from one experience to another experience, and therefore it's a very disjointed journey. So when you're doing your marketing funnel and you have your content marketing at each layer, very quickly you can suddenly be taken away from that by clicking onto another platform or another portal. China very much focuses on containing people for as long as humanly possible by providing them information and services at every point of that journey and understanding what the needs of people in those journeys. And another thing it does fantastically well is combining the physical world with the online world. So QR codes, for example, and they are making a resurgence here. So that's my big obvious prediction is that we will see QR codes back in the West. They haven't failed. They just needed people to want to adopt them. And so, for example, if you buy your Heathrow Express ticket, there's a QR code on that to get through the barriers to get into London. Which is helpful for the Chinese people because they're all very familiar for using QR codes. So in China, QR codes are literally everywhere on everything. It's very hard to kind of comprehend that. And when you go to Shanghai or you go to Shenzhen or Beijing, literally there'll be a QR code on the table in the restaurant, so you don't need to speak to the waiter or waitress. You scan the QR code, it takes you to the restaurant app. You order all the food, it goes to a screen downstairs. They come up and they serve you the food. There's QR codes on the screens of ads in the back of taxis to take you straight from the ad you're looking at to either to the WeChat account of that particular brand or through to a web page for that particular brand. So QR codes are pretty much everywhere and everything. What they've also allowed people to do is connect up commerce as well. So all of the sort of mobile commerce markets in China are largely driven around QR codes. So it's not the same technology that we have here, where we have sort of the NFI technology for payments. Everything there largely relies on those QR codes. And what they allow you to do is to create quite rich engagements, both in store, but also to ensure that you're driving people online to those particular stores offline. So a campaign that we ran for Pret-a-Manger in Shanghai was largely around using gamification to create vouchers and incentivize people to go into store, but everything was around the QR code. So all around the area where people would be going out at lunchtime to look for somewhere to eat, we were making sure that we had QR codes on outdoor advertising. We had people with flyers with QR codes, all with the intention of getting people to want to engage with the brand and driving them into the store. As I kind of mentioned about QR codes, the cashless revolution is something that is truly phenomenal in China. As I mentioned at the beginning, it's very, very difficult now to use cash when you go to China, when you try to buy things, when you try to take a taxi. That's largely because China has adopted sort of cashless mobile payments at a phenomenal rate because they weren't tied into that legacy of credit cards or debit cards. So it's very difficult for us to move on to a new type of a payment method because we're so it's so ingrained in our daily lives and our culture to use that particular thing. China just went from cash straight to mobile. It didn't really adopt credit cards or debit cards in the same way. And so what that meant is everybody, all 800 million of them, have all moved over to mobile payments. So WeChat, for example, one of the biggest social networks in China, has payment systems built within it, and they have 800 million people every month using their systems to pay for goods, which has meant that the market is worth absolutely phenomenal amount of money. $17 trillion the Chinese mobile payment market is worth. I actually heard a stat that 90% of all travel transactions in China now happen through mobile payment. So taxis, planes, buses, it's phenomenal. One of our first ever clients was Skyscanner, which we launched into China. And you know, these were the days when we thought the Western tech companies were so much more advanced than the Chinese. A couple of years ago, they got bought by the Chinese company Ctrip, and literally everything that Ctrip has done has been around that mobile environment and getting people to book and purchase through mobile. So that has created these huge opportunities to connect content with commerce, and then what that kind of brings us to is this idea of sort of a social OS. So I don't know if many of you know WeChat. A lot of people talk about WeChat and its kind of size and scale, but it's quite hard to comprehend how ingrained WeChat is in the daily lives of a Chinese person. It started about 7 years ago, and literally people do say that it is kind of one of the only apps you ever need in China. And here's a video on why.
If you are sitting in the United States or Europe right now, you've probably never used a Chinese app. But the reality is, if you want to know how the internet will develop, China, the land once known for its cheap ripoffs, has actually become a guide to the future. You know, the internet is the internet, but for China, the internet is more like an intranet. It's largely walled off from the Western world by this incredibly complex system of filters and blocks that we call the Great Firewall. And basically, the Great Firewall blocks any foreign site the Communist Party doesn't think it can control. So that means there is no Facebook, no Twitter, no Google. Instead, what filled the internet vacuum was a generation of Chinese copycats that have grown into huge companies. So for Google, you had Baidu. For YouTube, you had Youku. For Twitter, you had Sina Weibo, and the list goes on and on. It's almost as if the Chinese internet is a lagoon as an aside to the greater ocean of the internet. And in that lagoon, there are these swamp monster apps that bear some resemblance to the creatures in the ocean, but are mutated in some ways because they evolved in a different kind of environment. But things have started to shift in the sense that before, no one outside of the lagoon really cared about the swamp monsters. But now all of a sudden, some of the features they've developed are so amazing that Western apps are trying to copy them. And the greatest example of this is WeChat. WeChat is an example of, for lack of a better word, a super app. It's a Swiss Army knife that basically does everything for you. It's your WhatsApp, Facebook, Skype, and Uber. It's your Amazon, Instagram, Venmo, and Tinder. But it's other things we don't even have apps for. There are hospitals that have built out whole appointment booking systems. There are investment services. There are even heat maps that show how crowded a place is, be it your favorite shopping mall or a popular tourist site. The list of services goes on basically forever. But it's not the variety of things you can do on WeChat that makes it so powerful. It's the fact that they're all in one app. So why does that matter? Hypothetically, imagine you're sitting at home and one day you notice your corgi is dirty. You open WeChat, hit a few buttons, and a few hours later a man shows up at your door with some shampoo and a big vacuum. Your dog gets cleaned and he looks great. You take a photo, you share it with your friends, and tag the dog cleaning business. You haven't left the app. Your friend who likes Hello Kitty and works a boring office job is slacking off at work and looking at WeChat. She sees the photo of your clean corgi. She decides she wants her poodle cleaned. She clicks the tag on your photo and orders the same service. Within seconds, the man with the big vacuum is on his way to her house. She pays him, and he's happy because he got paid instantly on WeChat. She starts chatting with you to thank you. Neither of you have left the app. While chatting, she tells you about a new hip noodle joint. She says, you have to come. It's a schlep, but you accept. She orders food while still at her desk. You order a taxi. She pays for the food. On the way to her house, the man with the big vacuum invests the money he earned from both of you into a wealth management product that's probably a little too risky. Neither of you nor the man with the big vacuum have left the app. Both of you arrive and the app tells the kitchen you're there. Your WeChat profile photo pops up on the wall. It's an old photo from the year you had that weird part in your hair. Of course she makes a comment. Your food is served. You notice your meat is a bit overcooked, so you snap a photo and post a disparaging restaurant review. You're already on your phone and you remember you still owe your friend money because she paid. You transfer her money. Neither of you, the man with the big vacuum, nor the restaurant have left the app. At the restaurant, there are no menus, there are no waiters, there is no cashier. There is only WeChat. By rolling so many functions into one single app, it's altered the concept of virality. It's no longer just videos or images or tweets that can go viral. It's a dog washer, noodles, all sorts of companies and products that get the push of a social network. Here in China, that network is 700 million people. Sounds great, right? Well, it is, but using a single app to find a date, schedule an oil change, or notarize a document also enables WeChat to collect a staggering volume of personal data. They know what you talk about, who you talk about it with, what you read, where you go, why you're going there, who's there, how you spend money when you're online, how you spend money when you're offline. The list goes on indefinitely. For advertisers, this is a miracle. It's the combined data of Facebook, Amazon, Google, and PayPal, all in one place. The problem is, all of the data is information Chinese companies are forced to share with the Chinese government, which has a long record of human rights violations and isn't exactly shy about stalking its citizens.
So, as you can see, WeChat just has this huge amount of data. And that's one of the reasons why, at the beginning when we talked about AI, that China is such an advanced market for that. And the fact that that WeChat is centered around this chat messenger also enables amazing features like using artificial intelligence for chatbots, but also what the inclusion of social commerce has done with a platform like WeChat has also meant that it's become almost your sales CRM. So in China, and anyone that's ever done business in China will know this, email is almost dead. Email is almost redundant in China because of the power of the instant messaging platforms like WeChat. Like everything from spreadsheets and PowerPoints get shared. And that's because WeChat is just so ingrained in everybody's daily lives. And they've built their own ecosystem within that. So now brands are building apps within WeChat. So rather than creating apps for the App Store, China, in China, people are creating apps for WeChat because WeChat is the ecosystem. WeChat is the operating system. That's when it really becomes a phenomenal sort of place for us to want to do marketing, is that loop is already pretty much closed. And so all we have to do is tell the right stories within that loop to be able to sell our products and services. What that's also meant is that in things with, in terms of personalization, it's meant that we're able to deliver personalization at scale, which is always something that everybody has tried to do. I think from a brand perspective, you don't want to personalize your brand too much because you want to tell the story of the brand. But on an engagement level and a customer service level, you need to have those hyper-personalized communications. So we often refer to WeChat as a CRM on steroids because it not only allows you online to continuously talk to people and progress them through your marketing funnel or your sales funnel, but also it connects us to shoppers in the physical world through the QR codes, but also through payments. Now, if you're using WeChat to pay at a vending machine for a fresh orange juice, for example, you scan that QR code, and all of a sudden you're following the WeChat account of a fella called Mr. Orange, who runs the orange juice machines. And then Mr. Orange then uses artificial intelligence and a chatbot to continuously talk to you. They're not necessarily just pushing you messages, they're actually trying to engage with you and have a conversation. So they're using those kind of technologies in a way that's really building a lot of affinity with the customer. Now, we did a campaign recently for Manchester United, which is all about CRM. So the main purpose of that was to gain marketable records. But in China, it's very difficult for us to gain a lot of those records because email isn't really something people are trying to give away a lot of the time. So we have to be quite creative in the way we do that. And we had a mix of gamification with high production value, that we were using a lot of design elements that were relevant to the Chinese audience, but also using all of these things around personalization and choosing different stories for that campaign. So one of the key things that was built into that Manchester United campaign was the idea of gamification, but also social sharing. And China has done this phenomenal job in the world of social commerce. Now, I think now with platforms like Instagram trying to sell through that particular platform, they're starting to learn the things that China has been doing over the last few years. But China's social commerce market is absolutely huge. It's about $150 billion, or on its way to be very close to being $150 billion. But it has an e-commerce market worth $1.7 trillion. So it has a huge amount of growth still to go. There are a couple of platforms. There's three that are really kind of leading the way, but I've only got time to talk about a couple. One is a platform called Pinduoduo. Now, Pinduoduo is largely used not in the tier 1 cities, but in the smaller cities, the more rural areas of China, where people are still really hungry for those bargains. And what it is effectively like a Groupon type crowdsourcing, crowd purchasing platform. So 2 examples of particular journeys that you can do on Pinduoduo. One is you share a particular product that you want to buy on social channels, and for every person that then comes through from that link and buys it, everybody shares the discount amongst themselves. So effectively, you can get products almost for pennies, whereas they were pounds before. The other one mechanism that they have on Pinduoduo is that you can invite people to help you haggle down the price. So they effectively reward you for social sharing. And so what that does is it raises more awareness for the platform and brings in more people. So for example, you want to buy a diamond ring and you share it with 100 of your friends and they all share it, you could get 10%, 20% off this particular product. And so it's gamifying the purchasing process. And so content produced for these platforms is a lot more short, fun, and snappy. And it's led to this incredible growth for this platform in the last in 2 years. It's now the most downloaded app, the fastest growing downloaded app in China. The other application is on Alibaba's largest e-commerce site, which is called Taobao, which is the equivalent of probably of eBay. There's a certain part of the platform called Weitao. So when you scroll down, it takes you to this other world that exists within the app. And what it is it's a rich, immersive media environment that allows brands to tell some really interactive brand stories. So for example, once you scroll through, this particular space ad will then start to play a short, high production value advert, basically with people talking about these particular products.
那是我第一次一个人去纽约玩的时候，我刚到我租的公寓门口，然后我猫眼一看，就是这个男人。我上周不是刚从曼谷回来吗？太神奇了，又是这个男人。 哎，对，那件事你也听说了吧？
Straight after viewing that video, you can then click through, see all the products that are for sale that are mentioned in that video, and go straight through to buying them, all through the mobile, all in a rich environment. So, you know, when I'm scrolling through TV late at night and I come across the QVC shopping channel, it does make me laugh how backwards it does feel still with that system of buying things online. When in China, all of this stuff is happening on these mobile devices. It's phenomenal. And the last one, which is really interesting, is around short video. Now, short video is probably the best example, and the reason I left it last, of Chinese content platforms that are penetrating the West. So the biggest example of this is a platform called TikTok. So it started in China and it has about 500 million monthly active users there. But it now has 200 million active users across the globe. And they created a new portrait version of live video. And one of the most interactive elements of it is a bit like Tinder. Rather than swiping right, you swipe up. You can just scroll through hours and hours and hours of videos. So now in China, you get in a taxi. Taxi driver will have 2 phones. One of the phones is for Didi, which is the equivalent of the Uber, and the other phone is just videos. And he's just sitting there consuming videos all day. It's not very safe, but it is a sign of how people are consuming short video in China, which is already overtaken TV consumption already in China, consuming video on this way.
Inspired by the success of Musical.ly, our sister app launched in September 2016. TikTok was an immediate hit in Asia.
So TikTok is only 2 years old.
Places, and it grew in popularity to become one of the biggest video platforms in the region. People used it to share their skills and passions, but not only that, they used it to showcase their day-to-day lives. The app quickly took off in Japan, in South Korea, China, and Southeast Asia. It grew to become the main destination for people to share and express themselves in the form of short video. Every day, hundreds of millions of people create and share their moments on TikTok. Our TikTok family has become bigger and bigger. TikTok has risen to the top of app rankings in major markets, and it's only getting started. We have a great vision for the future. Let more people enjoy TikTok and become a platform that connects the world. Welcome to TikTok.
So, TikTok is now obviously one of the most exciting social networks that we have, even in the UK, in the West. A lot of brands are now looking at it as a way to deliver short-form video content in possibly the most engaging way you can through mobile. And it really does summarize the point that I'm making about China over the next 10 years. With all of the money, all of the technology, all of the advancements that they're making, they're only going to influence us in the West, because that is where the future of all the technology innovation is going to come from. So as we're looking at those platforms and how we want to develop our content, we can only look to them as a kind of window to the future. And so, yeah, if you want to stay in touch with us and learn about all the exciting things that are happening in China, then please do follow us on LinkedIn. I'm Tom, thank you.
Thanks very much, Tom.